Solstice crickets, season by season, continuing the what, folks? We're continuing the what? The silence. The silence that's going to take us out. The world continues while the world continues on its plan as we go on our lack of plan and our lack of response, where we were told if we're going to keep anything, that's exactly what we had to do, is keep it. If we're going to have it, we got to keep it. More clarity, I keep thinking about this, is we're just told that the world is one big thieving place. And all we have today is as best as we could do up until today, not counting all the maybe civilizations that got buried over time. And in one hand, I see small groups of people, even singular people, doing things that are just pretty phenomenal. In fact, we just had a pretty unprecedented condition happen with the work that we do. And I'm still in the again, there's no action that happens instantaneously. I tend not to want to promote. So I really can't explain quite yet to see what's going to happen, but I mean, I can just listen to the people's words. I can see the questions that are being asked on some documentation that was presented in a very large sense. People are just starting to get it, if they're getting it at all. They're just starting to see this global plan, which I've told you, it's just, I don't have any more words, really. There's no adjectives. It's just concentrated evil. We've gone off planet, folks. It's beyond. And the only really way that I've figured out that we do this thing to get it back somewhat is each of us has to take that responsibility to make it what we were expecting. And in the most innocent section, it's just to have our own place in the world that's protected. We pull all together to protect ourselves, and there aren't these psychopaths that we let rise to the top. And I think that's the key. We haven't demanded accountability in a responsible, right in their face way. And so this is what the other thing we're doing behind the scenes is attempting to bring accountability. All the criminal adjectives you can find that become government today are just us, the people, not stepping up where we found crime and arresting it. It's really, really that simple. And we've gotten out of the practice of it as well. That reflects back on a structure called government that everyone wants to denounce. And then we start our fairy tales. We start what we think is going on because we weren't intelligent enough to sit back and say, okay, I got to reanalyze this whole thing. I got to relook at the whole thing and see what is it? Where is this thing? But what's going on here really? And really, it may be, reality. It might be subjective. But nonetheless, within the constraint of that subjectivity, I'm coming to you every week to explain to you there are things you can do locally that eventually make great changes. In fact, there was quite a few things that have gone on in the last week that are pretty interesting. In some regard, never in the context of what we deal with, never happened before. For example, area of critical environmental concern. It's this place that the federal agencies pull out of your public domain land, your public domain on the thing you call public land. They have management, and they pull it out and they say that the environment has to be protected here. There's a whole set of rules about how they have to do that, and they don't accomplish any of that. And I tell you about this thing called coordination, is where each one of you living in a county in the country can have a say. And if you do better, you get in with your government, the local county government, which has the duty and obligation to protect you, just as the Declaration of Independence instructs it shall. Not the way the Supreme Court has diminished the preamble, but in fact it does. We have it in writing everywhere we look when we know where to look. But the county officials are the ones with the power to protect you as that government was supposed to. It's the obligation and duty of that government entity. They have the power in the local sense to actually prosecute crimes as well. That has not been exercised for a long, long, long time. But these areas of critical environmental concern, they just throw these down, and they're withdrawals of productive use of the land and your actual ability to go on the land. And based on some filings, understanding the subject matter, staying right on point, don't get way off in the nonsense of what you might hear. we were able to affect one of those areas. I've never seen that happen before. The agency came back and had to cut away everything to ostensibly cut away everything that it actually didn't have authority to take when it offered that area in the first place. And our coordination response, together with some counties and some other things that happened, was the witness of the crime against the people that caused the BLM to turn around and reduce that area. Now, we still have problems with that even. But the point is that until we step in and we just do these things, and folks, I just got to tell you, there's no threat here. There was no jeopardy that any of us were in when we did this against this crime that's an ongoing crime that has international roots. We proved all this in our lawsuit in 2013. In fact, I just saw Federal Register of the Forest Service. They're going deeper. They want to bring all the lands into pre-European influence state. These people are just completely nuts. I wanted to immediately. I wanted to know, well, how does that? They state a lot of laws that they're following that as their authority, and one of the rules they stated was that they were supposed to regard multi-use and sustained yield, not sustainable yield. It's sustainable development. Sustained yield. It's production. There's a law about that. They're supposed to meet that. How do you put your land into a pre-European influence condition if your mandate is to multiple use and sustained yield? It is beyond me. These people look right past this to tell you they don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about your land. They don't care about how your life is going to be. They don't care that the land can produce and give you a better life instead of austerity. They can give you abundance at some level. I'm not talking utopia. It's only within the constraints of the people that want to step up and do those things. But getting back to this, these successes. We got the crickets. The silence is going to get us. Then we see these little core things going on here and there. Catching the criminal, being the witness and catching the criminal. And watching them respond to being caught. That I'm trying to get you all to see you can step back into being effectual. Affect them and be effectual. To bring this thing back to where it went off the rails, and we didn't understand that. It's really up to us. I mentioned maybe last week the government may not have gone through its coordination to the government, to the rest of the governments, local governments, and maybe violating the 10th Amendment aspects of what coordination comes through. For those of you who want to see, Title 43, United States Code, Section 1712 is where you'll see the mandate. The supplemental guidance of which is the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, which when you look inside that isn't what these psychopaths, eco-terrorists, European influence idiots want to impose, but they regard what we need, mankind's needs, above that of the environment, actually. That y'all sitting back not realizing this, and I'm not saying I did 20 years ago, even 20. I've been doing this about 30 years now. I guess focused on this problem. Where'd American go, folks? I didn't know it then. Like I told you last week, I didn't know about, when you get into your high school, you listen to authority, you think it is authority. I mean, that's how you're brought up. They tell you got to do selective service or you're going to go to jail. Some people might be aware enough. They like Muhammad Ali. He decided I'm going to be a conscientious objector. I don't even like that term, but anyway, he decided, what did I know when I was doing? So I just was going to follow what they said because I just wasn't aware. That's how we all are. And today I'm a lot less myself, but who knows in what areas I still am. I catch myself periodically buying into false premises quite a bit, actually, just to kind of listen in on the conversation and go along. And then shortly right after I realize, wait a minute, that won't fly. And I can't really keep my peace anymore. It's just a violation. Not that I don't know that I try to insult anyone, but in clarifying the error, you insult people. And then I'm finding out more again, I'm just, at some point I try to be innocent to all this. There's people involved with everything you're hearing. They got a stake in it. They got a stake in that outcome. They got their hand in the pie somewhere behind the scenes, why they're even involved. I look at people, why are you even involved in this? And then later down the road, you find, oh, well, they had a stake in that matter. That's why they were trying to get you to go that direction. And so we have to be aware enough to be present enough in order to counter all this nonsense. It's really everywhere. It's kind of a bizarre. That's the reality as well. That we have a place to be. But I told you that there's coordination requirements in the world. You can be a part of all that in learning how to re-engage this thing called government to these really ignorant people that are sitting in government that you put there by your vote. Because you're ignorant, so you put ignorance in. I notice when people are more well aware, well read, and well informed, they don't put those ignorant people in. It's really amazing how simple that works. So what I do, I've learned to, or tried to do, and learned to try and do, is this thing, what we have, what do we call education? Maybe the real education, where you're actually picking stuff up and then having to learn it. And then I've told you before, that's not the only thing. Knowledge of a thing is not the ability, the application of a thing. You have to learn how to do it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff around that. And that's just doing. You just start to learn to do. But this week we've had lots of interesting things. And one of them was in coordination. One was a property owner standing up, happened to be a miner, a colleague of mine, who has patents. And I'm going to talk about how powerful patents are. The patents describe exactly the congressional intent of this country, and it wasn't to run you down. And well, I'm going to say this, I know it may sound odd, but Stephen, I'll go Stephen. I know it's Stefan, but I understand that it's Stefan. Stephen is Ron Stephen on the UCY an hour before, well before me. He said people who believe that the ownership in ocean or ownership of land or property they're a dumbass. So I asked in the chat room whether or not he was calling me a dumbass. Well, I don't think he was. I think what we have, it's the communication. To me, I was being a smart ass to bring it up. But the point is, for us, if you look at soil disposal, that's the chasm you can create. Because these statements by those that are in the seats of decision have said they don't have an authority over these things. And if you know that, your knowledge of that and your direct application brings it present, where it's been hid before. So we had one of my colleagues. Not only was he doing coordination for Jefferson Mining District with the county and asked to go to make a record of our last Division of State Lands coordination response, he was also asked by an Oregon official to do so, to bring the fact of his problem with the mining condition for all miners and mining claims, and his privately to 3 patents they have over land. They have a 3-patent claim, which or 3 patents, which are different types of mineral patents, which also give the surface. The expressed will is stated right in there, becomes a contract that all y'all can stand on, that he brought forward, and this is how we analyze this, and we had him present it. Was it an impairment of the contract of the patent? For those of you that haven't quite got this idea that your deeds and things and you want to talk about a allodial title, all that's nonsense when you get to the patent. In this country, United States of America, they issue letters patent, the patent to the conveyance. It's what you have. Here's what it is. It's not, the patent is not the answer. What it is it's ultimate evidence. It presumes a court of justice is there to recognize it. Now, we found out in 2013 that the Bar Association has now interfered with that. That makes them felons, and then when they go against and make war on the laws of the United States to interfere with that will, it makes them treasonous. This is not that hard to get at. But you have to prepare your mind and prepare by research and understanding the right stuff in order to get back at this, that we can bring accountability, that in the patent it says that the government is supposed to assist your development of your land. Assisting is not regulation, folks. And so all these land use codes are all violation. If you know, you come from the core. Now, if you come from land deeds, or you come from warranty deed, you come from titles of less than fee simple, the ultimate evidence of which the fee simple is in the patent. You come with less or no evidence, then they treat you as less than fee simple. Now you are subject to that code, whatever you just describe it, whether it's corporate or government or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have it's a status. And so the knowledge of that and then the reapplication, we're seeing a great big unprecedented change, not in what we're doing, because we've known to do this. developing over time the place to go do this and watching people respond appropriately. So I just need to tell you, for all y'all that are wondering where to go, you just got to get involved, and you'll see, and just find people that are doing better than what you hear out there, and you don't have to put yourself in jeopardy. You can still get this stuff going, and you can learn how to re-engage this, and we can put this you want to put a genie back in the bottle. This is what this is going to be the first time in history we get to do that. The psychopath genie got out, and we can put him back. It's not really that hard, but it takes a while, because all of us have a wrong idea of how things were supposed to be done. So we try to invent new things to fix things that were already sitting there to be done the way they were, but everybody has avoided or didn't know to engage. It was really refreshing to watch different people in different sectors of interest find our document to be interesting in different ways. In other words, we identified what amenities are. They're everything, essentially. Everything that you hear that eco-terrorists or these sustainable development plunderers use is an amenity. Natural resource services is amenity services. They have no value, folks. Zero value against a property right or the will of Congress. And yet they've gone this big, giant power. But once you see that, and you realize all they're doing is amenity-based felony in trespass upon your property, because it comes by some authority. They come under the color of authority. It's a felony. This is over, folks. It's just a matter of getting everyone else to see the law again and actually enforce it and become that witness to the crime and be your ally with everybody. There is no room for division, certainly, and that's what's killing us. But there's the answer here. In other words, this so-called liberty that we have is the order by which we afford it to ourselves. So this consensus processes that they put on us, the consensus reality that you've heard in almost everywhere you bring up these psychopathic nonsense, religious sounding religiosities like climate change, like sustainable development. These things, this is all based in consensus reality. Is the felony? It's a felony. Consensus reality is a felony. If it's imposed nationally on everyone, it's treason. This is not hard to get at, and these are not obscured terms. They've been obscured to us, but they're not obscured term to understand. These are people making war on our lives. That's a crime. And what we haven't done is stepped up to enforce the law, and then now we're doing it. We're trying to show how, and this is why we don't get too promotion like, oh, we got this handled. This is a battlefield. America is no joke. We have people that are denying the law to you and to us, and so we have to go slow. We're having to make arrangements with the sheriff for how he's going to allow us to enforce the law, because he's not. That guy's not going to want to answer us, is he? And he doesn't. Neither anybody else that's been working in league with the organized criminal syndicate that we now call government, that's not actually functioning to be responsible to us. And so I ask continually, step up where you can. It's a little different work, but it's required work here. And it doesn't put us in jeopardy like we might have done earlier, like I may have done in the 90s. I would have thrown I did. I threw myself. I didn't care about going into court. I went into court because it was a big lesson to me. I was learning stuff going in. I figured, okay, well, I'm only limited to the liability of the statute. That's only going to be cash. Ultimately, if I have to, I can make payments in my fine and fee and all this other stuff, my civil rights being imposed on me while I learn how to defeat these people. And I don't know that I think we've done a good job. I think we've done at least coming to the awareness. Now comes, as I've told you, there's a momentum that goes on. The psychopaths have got the mass of the people in a momentum contrary to their nature and their law. Physics says, the natural law of physics says mass moving is going to take a time to adjust and slow or alter its course. And that's kind of why it takes a time. So when you find out that you're into a condition where consensus reality is the felony, why don't we have more arrests? It can only be because we're not willful enough to insist on our law. And that reflects on government, like what government looks like. Government's this inert tool that people fill. And we get in this vote idea that we fill. What I'm talking about is I don't even have to vote for anybody. And they still have to fulfill the law. Let me dump it on Grammy Mary. She goes into Kansas and brings Toto along, and she has this nice campaign that everyone likes Toto, so they vote for her. And she's sitting in the seat of decision in the county commission, and I walk up completely from out of state and I say, I got a mining right here, Miss Commissioner, and you are duty bound to protect it where these people over here violated me. I don't care who she is. I don't care what party she came from. I don't care her opinions. I don't care anything. I don't have to vote for her. I don't have to not vote for her. The obligation of that office is to protect the property owners to the extent that the state was created to do so. And Grammy Mary, being a dutiful officer, would look at my cause. She'd identify I had property. She'd identify that was to be protected. If I was intelligent, I'd have the law that says it was to be the laws that she could use to say, yeah, I have probable cause as a commissioner to say, yeah, you are to be required be protected, and I'm the officer to help that. This wasn't supposed to be an antagonism. This was supposed to be how we moved ourselves along in the history of histories, how we came to a better place on a better shore to have a better life. And I can see it. I don't see it now as I was told it was there, but I still see it, and I think I see it in a much more substantial way. And our problem is we let the psychopaths rule the roost. We let the fox watch the hen house, however you want to consider yourself. And we didn't take the responsibility with the existing structure that's there to protect us, to have the system do what it was duty bound to do for us. Instead, what we've allowed is a whole bunch of officers, supposed officers, and so-called representatives to represent to us what they have confined through their imposition of the bar mentality, bar association mentality of threat, implied quiet threat. In other words, if you don't do what we say, you could be held liable. And so everyone goes, ooh, because everyone who's in office is ignorant. And what they learn is not the law when they get in. What they learn is how to scam the system even more. Because it behooves them. Because the Bar Association is an occupying force and wants to advance itself to its security. That's why I keep saying to you, last week it was, the title of the broadcast was False Front. And as I say that, for those of you on Pastcast, if you want to use the content for this broadcast in the future, it's BTWRLM167. BTWRLM167. Put that all together in a search engine behind the Woodshed also, and you should be able to get the link for all the content that I may get to. Obviously, I'm already down the pike. I'm bleeding to death here on a whole other concept than when I started to talk about. But I'm leading there. This is the point. I'm trying to get people to understand it's a little bit to do, but it's not impossible. And we have it in us to do. And maybe I'm a peculiar bird that I've did a certain path, but I'm here to explain that. So this is not even, you don't have to say, oh, well, you did it. I can't do that. No, I'm here to explain it to you. Or explain what I've seen. You can take as much as you need. And thank you for the couple of people that wrote emails. I hope I got to all of y'all that had that wrote to want to help. Again, my basic conversation with everybody would be choose something that interests you to the passion level. That way you'll stick with it. It's just the way that works. But we have false fronts. And this is what the Bar Association has set us up for the fall, essentially. And these things, as we see in the news, are false flags. Well, no, they're false fronts to other things. Yeah, you can call them false flags, but they're just false fronts. They're what I called also the spaghetti western we live in. It's all last week. For those of you that went to the blogcast, you saw that. For those that you don't even know what I'm kind of referring to here. How all this stuff ties together week after week after week. And if you go to the links and you read about more than what I post in the blogcaster, there's a whole lot to read there. And I realized the other night, maybe y'all don't read what I read. Maybe I'm in a possible task to just say, here, you need to go read this and you'll see more. Maybe you don't have the eyes to see, I realize. And I don't know what to do about that part. That's almost too much for me. I can only talk in generalities here. I suppose we could get down to the nuts and bolts, but that would become so darn slow. It's better to, it seems better to me to give you all these things that can be done and hope you choose one. And if you get that earnest, you'll contact either me or someone else that you think knows what's going on, and you'll roll up your sleeves and try. Just try something. It's not that difficult. So we have consensus reality, which is really a felony against us. And consensus reality is inside a process called coordination, but on the cooperative agency side. And I told you last week that we were told that there's going to be this big interference by the military in a land that may or may not be ceded to the U.S. federal government. And I haven't even looked at all that we're going to interfere with us. And I made a comment that, well, maybe the the people need to say, you didn't coordinate with our counties in order to not do this thing you want to do, which is going to interfere with GPS and possibly cause commercial airliners to fly out of the sky and hit the ground. Remember, they've adjusted a lot of laws, like in Title 50. If you want to know weather modification, you're listening to Ron Stevens' show, talking about weather modification, a document, go to Title 15. It's written right there. You want to see what they can do that to you, it's in Title 50, 1520A, where they say, well, we can do it as long as we give you notice. See, in America, it's due process. You get notice, opportunity, time, and place. They give you the notice. You now have the opportunity to respond. When you don't, you lose. They get to do whatever they want. We're in such a criminal state now that when they give you notice and you respond, they don't care, and they go. Well, last week, I told you that your GPS may not be working through the month of June. This week, the Navy canceled those planned GPS outages in Southern California. Well, it was supposed Southern California and Nevada and Oregon, remember? Up to 40-something thousand feet. Now, I don't know what, I'm sure the military doesn't listen to me. Well, maybe they do, behind the woodshed, to find out that they did something wrong and they fix their problem. They have to give notice. They have to offer opportunity response, unless they can find a thing in the law that doesn't require it. A lot of times necessity will, but I told you this doesn't seem like necessity, although we do live in battlefield America, and maybe they do have it. They would have to declare that. Well, heck, they don't want to do that. They would start to expose the real problem. See, once you understand the real problem, you can address it. Once you get outside of being reactive and start getting responsive, they have trouble, a lot of trouble. As I've told you, it's kind of an astonishing thing. I know it's not a big deal. An area of critical environmental concern, the withdrawal of which is every use but to protect a creature in that area. In this case, it was verdant pools of fairy shrimp. For this agency to not just blink, but actually pull back what they were claiming they could control private property outside of this area, for them to do that is unprecedented. That didn't happen because no one was looking, folks. That's what I'm trying to tell you, how easy this really is. Now, does it mean that they've done it right? No. I think there's some other problems. Neither here nor there. Once you understand how this thing is worked out, you start to realize where there is and where their limitations are, and where they're constrained. And for us, we know in the so-called code that guides them. It doesn't guide us; it guides them. We know how to call that out. And it isn't a fix, but that's because I think there's not enough of us. Well, I keep asking you, step up, step up, step up. I'm so disappointed at miners generally. The microcosm of the miner is the macrocosm we know as America. Not hardly any miners stepped up, and then when we tried to come together, there was an internal subversion to try to blow up the mining district that could become effective. Now, we've gone on to do great things. The remainder of the miners went over and do useless things and hurtful things and things that are wasting time and cost tons of money. What we do costs hardly anything comparatively. Our time is spent in our lives dedicated to learning the laws that we should have been told before, that once you learn them, I become annoying to people because and I can't help it, folks. When I hear a statement that's wrong, I just got to give you the authority in the subject matter of my expertise. And I don't mean that as an expert. I mean what I've focused on. I don't mean to degrade anybody's point, but if they're going to say something wrong and it's in a thing that'll hurt others, I speak up. And I speak up in a pretty authoritative way. It's not oh, that one point's wrong. There's a whole reason why you're wrong. Your premise is set up wrong. And I guess that can be kind of annoying to people. I don't mean it to be that way, but I want them to know better, like I've seen. Because what I've seen and what we do with what I've seen and what other people have found and bring to the table, what building on this, is becoming effective. But it takes numbers. This is the problem. Going against the mass of the people, the public opinion, and the minority control of the herd. Only takes one or two sheepdogs, remember, to control the whole herd. Requires more that are not susceptible to sheepdogs or the rancher. And so information's key in the proper application of it. And I've asked you to, understand in a way. You don't have to go out there and stick your face you don't have to stick your face underneath a jackboot in order to get this done. And then you start to understand that there's a way and dynamic to approach this. That consensus reality is felony on you. It should be about all you need. That you hear me week after week telling you it's everywhere. I tell you it's a target-rich environment. We're infiltrated and surrounded. This should not be a problem. You shouldn't be wasting too much time looking for some place to be passionate about that just gets in your craw that ain't right. And you are the determiner of how fast you go, so that's also on you. That we shouldn't be seeing this as a problem. That there is a liberty, an order that we can follow, that we've made for ourselves, even if we didn't do the actual action, that's sitting there to be used, versus the fairy tale that we bring in a word that says that we're going to get rid of both liberty and order. In this word anarchy, essentially. That there's tools that we can use to bring liberty and order and bring settlement and peace to our lives that didn't exist prior to what we have today, and all based in what I can now see is based in this law of the land, not the one by the legal, but the actual land, the obligations and duties of government to that. And that puts everybody that's in those offices subject to that servitude, that responsibility, the liability, the culpability, the fiduciary breach, as you've heard me say. That this information that we get is all powerful. The inculcation is all powerful. When I talk about educating, we're trying to do it in the right way, where you get everything else from outside the world. The media and stuff is giving you things that are not correct. Which gets us to these, we start vacillating, well, what do we have to do here? We abandon what was given to us and we just adopt a bunch of other things. I'm really, I don't even want to get too deep into this. I'm really critical. I'm really disappointed in this anarchy idea. It's not what people say. It was the establishment of liberty and order. That's the opposite of the lack of both. That's anarchy. And it's attached to, anarchy is attached to a society that had liberty and order. That the wholesale throwing out because you're being oppressed by people, psychopaths in the government, you throw out what was established, is really not a proper response. The information you get is all powerful. You respond in these reflexive type knee-jerk reactions. That's what that's why I've been almost not hypercritical, I guess, but super critical, I guess I'll say, of this Snowden guy. And I'm talking a little bit, now my mind just kind of went to the Freakers Ball talking about, and thank you, Solomon, for your words. I appreciate the insights that you have and what you're saying and your support of the broadcast and what I'm bringing. That actually Solomon made a comment to that, which was exactly on point. My problem with Snowjob Stone and why I believed that, and I still believe it, and Greenwald and all these guys they want to give you so much information at a time, they want to launder the information to you, and the WikiLeaks and all that, is that, and I think Solomon said this, and if I'm wrong, it's a paraphrase, and that's where I'm going to go with this because it made a lot of sense in what I've been saying. Not because it's what I've been saying, but because it is what the problem is that I see in these guys like Snowjob, who was really parroting. Yes, he brought the information to us, and yes, he showed us how comprehensive, but that was the deal. That was the plan. He was just parroting what the other guy in 2005 was saying was already there. That I think it was Solomon's words, even paraphrased here, that he said, Snowden sets up a dialectic narrative to trigger self-censorship. It's a dialectic narrative to trigger self-censorship, was exactly what I said. I even brought up the report, the study that was done by the university in the past, behind the Woodshed broadcast, that proved that's what's happened since he's come out. In one regard, I have no more thought than what I told you he would do has been proven, that is reflected in what Solomon said is my problem as part of the snow job. It's what I see going on in lots of places elsewise, whether or not people are cognizant of it or unconscious to it. They promote these dialectic narratives that they've been programmed with. Consensus reality bases itself in that as well. In other words, you get a consensus of scientists that say that so-called science says, another magi, science says, open the door, right? So science says there's climate change and it's causing this and causing that, is not a reality. It's a felony. Until we actually get that. It's a dialectic narrative that causes self-censorship. So, thank you, I guess, as I remember Solomon, I think, saying that. Completely consistent with what I'm saying when I say about this snow job study. Whether all this information that comes out to you through the internet and all the stuff that I care that you care enough to be able to filter it, not just denounce it, but identify it for what it is and move identically opposite to what it's attempting to get you to do by responsive action. And not only as the action, but as the example of the action. In other words, as we move through our process and exampling of what we find we need to do, that shows other people how to go about doing it to that level, wherever that went. It may not reach all levels, it may not reach all things or touch all matters, but it goes there and shows an example that it's possible. Right now we need a ton of that. And we get this developing information, and Battlefield America, watch out. I get to keep thinking about this Jade Helm, that I think we're underneath this continuing military operation that goes through the South and all. And I think somehow I get this idea, we haven't heard much about it. I'm not going to bring it up more than just to say that's just the thing that keeps coming back. I think we're just in a continuing military operation. That's one of them. And we start hearing these things, and just to go through pretty quickly on how they get us to go in a narrative. We either self-censorship. Self-censorship can be just as easy as denouncing something and not moving to counter it. The scope of that is immense, actually. This Orlando shooting thing came up. False information. There's information that comes out, and you got to kind of parse through it. The taking of the time of doing that can be a waste of time too, unless there is a point to why you're doing it, to identify the method. I think is very important, and how what they're doing evolves, because I told you they're an amoeba, these people. They will find out how you resist and what you do and how you respond, and they will alter their next action based on their finding of your awareness of the newness of these things. That in the story of the Orlando, and I won't touch this more than to show you all the false information that comes out, that should get your mind around how this is working. Why? Because we need to find out, even put it in the category of more probable than not that it was something. And so we can start to identify the real culprits, and that should fortify you locally. In other words, when we're doing what we're doing locally, we find out these officials, wherever they are, whether they federal FBI or the NSA coming in and or a TSA putting on no-fly lists, and the state, the governor being part of the problem, and you see how you can identify them for who they are, and you no longer have that doubt in your mind. Not just to the point of, oh, they're all no good. I mean specific, causal statements. This Orlando thing came out, and one really quick information came out about somebody else in Santa Monica that was stopped with guns and bombs and all this other thing. And I looked at that, all happening on the same day, folks. And I said, this is going to blow up. There's something else about this. Now, I certainly can't tell you everything. I wasn't there. I'm not seeing it. I'm only knowing what I'm seeing here. But it has come out now that that Santa Monican guy actually was looking for help by the Santa Monica police, because when that Orlando dude got snuffed, that wasn't part of the plan that the Santa Monica guy bought into as a team member with that guy in Orlando. Should explain to you that we're being played. It's beyond now saying it's a hoax, a false fraud, a combination of the two. We have active operations going on to control it's a terror operation, folks. It's a war of terror. Now, once this happened, this story came out, it got shut down for a while. That took a few days for people on the internet to pick up, and I was happy someone picked it up. I don't have the time to really go after this. You get a link, you can start reading this. I'm sure you can get on the internet and find it now. But I looked at this little thing, this little anomaly at the same time as Orlando in Santa Monica on the same thing over the same subject matter. I said, this is evidence of a bigger military operation. I put it in that case because I don't see police and the military or these ways that they do this as any different than a military execution of over your life, an occupation over your life. Now, when you look at the sequence of events immediately around this Santa Monica dude, there's something else going on. There's something way bigger, way beyond. That if you're not aware of these things, you can start to get into the complacency of just denying it, just calling it a false flag, just calling it a hoax, whatever you want to call it. You've just titled it, and it wasn't any of that. It's exactly what they're trying to do. It's a dialectic narrative to give you to impose self-censorship. And inaction is the bigger problem for me. There is I think it was who is this guy? I have a problem with him anyway, but at any rate, he does some good stuff anyway. G. Edward Griffin. You know, I didn't like his Jekyll Hyde thing over the Jekyll Island story because he was wrong on the dead of night imposition of the Fed. That didn't happen. That's not in the law. The record shows it wasn't done in the dead of night, and the last day it possibly could happen in December. It happened a few weeks before the Christmas, and it happened in the lawful processes that the Fed was born. Born, like a corporation is born. Okay. And so his story always has a problem with me. However, he does bring up this, and I have to give him, I just say, I'm glad he found out these listings of things, because this was, to me, a very serious piece of information that was going unnoticed for a couple of days about this. And then all of a sudden, the false flag hoax, crisis actor thing started popping up, which all could be. I'm not saying that. I want you to look past all that. This was an operation. It's highly probable. I would put it as highly probable this was an operation. This is an operation that creates a dialectic in you to cause self-censorship and or inaction. That you hear further that all these things that are going on, given that there was a problem here that we don't even know whether it is real or not. It could be. Some people could have died. I don't throw that out at all. That we find out that the police admit officers may also be responsible for gunning down the nightclub patrons. Would be an admission by government that I don't think they would do unless people got shot. Whether or not they were gunned down dead, I don't know, but they were apparently admitted they got shot by the cops. Which triggers over the Santa Monica guy saying, wait a minute, Orlando dude wasn't supposed to die by this plan. I'm a patsy. I'm being set up to be killed. That SWAT teams were called 3 hours later than this guy goes sweeping through this place supposedly and then starts shooting people. It's pretty phenomenal. That we immediately had the narrative also that an AR-15 was out there, and here we have the gun control thing that, don't waste any crisis, even if the ones that we create. In fact, when you look at the scenario of all that, there was not an AR-15 used. And yet that hits your mind. That hits the minds of those that are susceptible. It may not affect you. It hits those that are effective that it hits, and those people are going to work and be divisive against you if you don't think it means something. You'll go on all the reasons why it's not a problem. Like I do. I don't understand how anybody has a discussion on this, but they still have it. Everyone still has this. So narrative failure, Orlando Islamic terrorist, which was also another narrative failure, did not use an AR-15. Obama comes out, the unqualified comes out and says this guy was not tied to an Islamic group. Fairy tale here, folks. No, just write a movie, because this is what the script is about. But the AR-15 wasn't used. This is being used to bring on this control. A fact check, AR-15 wasn't used in Orlando, and it wouldn't have mattered anyways. Another story. I'm going to just cut right through these. You can read them. I'll just post them in the blogcaster. The bottom line, listen to the theme of the incongruities and the lies that are being thrown out there by media and by the officials and all this stuff. And don't miss the anomalies, like the police saying we shot people, like the Santa Monica guy saying, but the Orlando dude wasn't supposed to die. That wasn't our plan. And you'll read more about where his plan came from. For those of you that are into showing the problem, and the guy had an interesting gun anyway. I've been looking, wondering whether they'd finally had one. It actually shot different size rounds. I think of 5.52 and 7.62 or so. My thought was, I wondered if they had a rotary magazine shotgun that I could put underneath that. That'd be kind of a neat one. But at any rate, so when you hear someone call AR-15 an assault rifle, show them this was an interesting list of things. AR doesn't stand for assault rifle. It stands for the company who first designed that gun many, many, many years ago. And it's not the military version. But this is the narratives they keep throwing on you. And if you believe that they're a lie, and they're a lie, you just become you just spout whatever you'll spout and become non-active against what they're doing to set the narrative for what action is coming. Arma Light Rifle. Does that sound familiar, folks? Arma Light Rifle. Arma Light Rifle is AR. It's not assault rifle. This is the types of terminology imposition that they make on us. But that gun wasn't even used. As the narrative is brought up to allow this is consensus as well, to allow the ability to have a mass of people have a say over something that none of this pertains to, which is what they're trying to attack, which is that Second Amendment. And it says shall not infringe, doesn't it, say, folks? It says that. And it shall not infringe. And yet you've heard the Bar Association attorneys step up in the Supreme Court and say, oh, but we can infringe a little bit. Certainly the freedom of speech, they brought on this theory, the freedom of speech does not allow you to walk into a theater and shout fire. And that's how they infringe the Second Amendment. But we're not talking about interpretation anymore. We're talking about things happening and acting against these provisions that we're supposed to be using to protect us and had available to us to use, being infringed by those that intend to subvert you and disempower you to subject you even further. I mentioned to you a long while back that Donald Trump appears to be so far left of Hillary, it's scary, that Hillary is a rhino con, just a warmonger, And I don't think Trump is out of that either. That notwithstanding the fact of the really stupidity behind national elections now anymore, that I told you that watch out what you think is going on with this guy Trump. So I'm just trying to look at this thing as a effectiveness. I told you whenever he talks about subject matter I've researched over a long time, he does not have a clue on what the subject matter is to even make a comment that he makes a comment on, and he's speaking to everyone's emotions, no different than Obama did, but in a slightly different way. He's taking a different tack, but he's appealing to certain emotions, which are now being said to breach on over now into the to those that are feeling the burn. Last week it came out after the Orlando thing that Trump, he just speaks, he just talks. Donald Trump just flipped on gun control. If you don't think this is focused on one of these major aspects of fundamental rights of your life and the destruction of your way of life and your ability to protect that, this guy came out to the NRA and said he supported the idea that he would protect gun rights. He was in favor of it. I think he's a concealed weapons permit holder. If you even needed that, that's a violation in my mind. The courts have said that's okay. I can't overturn that by myself. But that's still a goal at some point. Come with a proper discussion. Like, court, you didn't have a jurisdiction to even discuss my right. It was fundamental. It's outside of your jurisdiction. I don't hear anybody talking like that. No, they come by way of, we got to have a permit, and then you failed to give me one, and so now you've agreed you're subject to that authority, that regulation authority, instead of saying, no, like I'm doing in the mining law, that was a productive right outside of commerce. You don't have an authority. That's an obligation and duty on government, or you're a felon. How's that? Donald Trump just flipped on gun control was the title. He said after the Orlando shooting that he agrees that people on watch lists should not have the right to bear arms. Now, I've told you about a little situation that we're involved in where the Assembly of Jefferson Mining District wrote a probable cause, show cause-based complaint against the Secretary of Interior, saying that show cause how, based on these facts, you're not a felon or committing treason. And the next thing we got is a call from the so-called law enforcement officer of the BLM, intimidating and tampering with the witness of our chairman who signed the paper. And then the FBI came to talk to him at some restaurant and tried to threaten him. And I told you we had all the answers that we thought they were going to need to have answers to. Essentially, that what he was operating was not to intimidate the government, but to exercise his obligation and duty under Title 18 U.S.C. sub 4. And that if the FBI agent wasn't going to advance the cause, he was going to be in violation of a felony 18 U.S.C. 3 as an accessory. That after that, apparently, our chairman, my colleague, was put on a watch list. That Donald Trump would agree. Now, this is a crime going on, that this guy's on a watch list. Accessory felonies are being committed by the FBI and the DOJ here. That this guy Trump would agree that anybody on a watch list should not have a right to bear arms. That I'm telling you that when you look through the narrative that's going to get you to agree, these people are not helpful to us at all. And I'm being nice, and I'm trying not to get worse, because you get off and you start calling people names, and I don't like doing that. We have to have a better thought about what's coming on us. The reactive response. We're going to build a wall. Don't go stop bombing those people so they stop getting in their canoes with their ACAC carrying camels and come across the Atlantic. No, don't stop bombing them and to keep them from coming over. No, keep bombing them and then build a wall around your place. Snicker, snicker. Everyone inside the wall doesn't realize they can't get out now. If that hasn't been done by all the State Department impositions on your right to travel about. You're free to travel. What a lie. And yet we didn't notice it. Nobody with a Second Amendment right has said anything about that. The Oath Keepers stepped up. They're going to come and help us. They're going to do what we're supposed to do. They're all trained. Look where that's gotten y'all. And I've tried to tell you that everyone's reacting to the wrong premise, and so they're going to do the wrong things, if they're even intentioned correctly. I see this all the time. So I said in a Twitter, those of you that want to follow, not that I I don't have that many followers, but anyway, or as Grammy Mary calls them, stalkers. I think I wonder, because a lot of them don't interact. So I wonder what all this is. But behind a Woodshed and Twitter, I said, this is not Trump flipping. This is Trump slipping. He slipped. That wasn't supposed to come out so soon, that he was actually willing to denigrate your rights. The uninfringible. This is not in favor of Colonel Sanders is not in favor of Hillary or anybody, libertarians or anything else. In fact, if I ever get down the road here, not even in the libertarian, the guy that didn't get elected in McAfee. I mean, he just spouted off some stuff. I go, well, why were you interested in that instead of this other thing that's more substantial to us? If you're an American president, so-called. So Donald Trump comes out right after this Orlando, and he agrees that he's going to interfere with your rights if you're on a watch list. It's an unlawful, no due process, based on necessity, extrajudicial. We get to beat you up in Battlefield America discussion. That's what this guy agrees to. Who used his knee-jerk responses and not goes to the cause in order to keep you from having to do knee-jerk responses. It's the way of the world anymore. He's also responding to consensus mass opinion, if you understand that. That's a felony against you, this guy Trump. Now, I don't want to condemn him. Maybe he's a great guy. Maybe he has an odd way about him. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate the honesty of New Yorkers. I have some good friends from New York that they have this attitude. It's just great. I appreciate it all to heck. All to Hades and back. But when you're talking about running policy on things in the national, having the power of the President of the United States anymore, and the way it works out, there's a different analysis that has to come out. Don't underestimate the plan. There's more evidence of the plan underfoot here, folks. United States government just approved billions for its own weapons the same day it pushed gun control for citizens. We won't get into all that citizen stuff. Let's just go. You either stand up and you affect your own rights and your fundamentalists, or you don't. Let's put it that way. But did you understand that the same day that they pushed gun legislation after Orlando, which appears to be a mission, a military mission against you, that the U.S. just approved billions for its own weapons? Look, let me go return to the Second Amendment. What's the purpose for the Second Amendment? And I want to shock some of you. It's not for going hunting. Unless the hunting is over some particular type of oppressor. But it's not for your hunting. It's not for recreation, folks. Let's pull that nonsense. What's the Second Amendment, the purpose of it for? That the government could not infringe the right of the people to push back militatarily, I should say, not military. They got the weapons. What are they doing to diminish your capacity and going after all the veterans that have the capacity to operate more than just a pea shooter? Aren't they diminishing as an occupying force your ability to affect their tyranny? Wouldn't this be a perfect military maneuver over time? That these people that are wanting gun control are really treasonous in their request, in their idea, in their consensus. That what they're attempting to do is take away your right, your fundamental right to throw down tyranny in a construct called government. And Trump is okay with it, and Hitler is okay with it, and the burn feels great. And I hear crickets. I haven't heard and I know it's not going to work, but I haven't heard the movement that says stop voting. Just stop voting and watch what happens to show you and prove once and for all when no one voted there was still someone put in office. Why? Because it's a military operation against you. And every step is being taken, whether it be by the Bar Association subversion, those people that have a knot in a pistol sitting on the soil of the United States that they gave to the UN for the purposes of its non-profit charity to you. Whether it's by the legislators or the Bar Association makes these laws that are supported by the political parties, which I will remind you, we sued all three entities, folks, because they're all committing treason. In 2013, remember, you would say, what happened to that lawsuit? No one really wants to look at what happened to that lawsuit. I mean, truly. Notwithstanding that they've hidden the files, it doesn't matter that you see the docket. You understand what you're looking at? They didn't answer, folks, because they couldn't. They are committing treason in this country, and I hear crickets, and we have the court case to prove it. And how did they do that? By not answering the claim, the prima facie case, folks. We laid it out. They didn't have an answer that would exonerate them. So while you are being pressed to take away your uninfringible Second Amendment, the government is empowering itself with weapons beyond, folks, beyond. For those of you thinking your pea shooters are going to do anything. It's always astonishing me. How the heck, in other countries, it's supposed to be less free, why everyone has a rocket launcher and a big military weapon and anti-aircraft, this and that. What happened? What happened, folks, in America? All at the same time this week, Social Security comes out with final rules. Did you know about them? Did you know you had an input on those? Talk about coordination. Talk about your combat possibilities. Why aren't we exercising those? Those are non-threatening, no jeopardy on those. Why aren't each of us writing these comments and then giving ourselves standing to make this so difficult on them to pull this off that they can't? The final rules are disclosed on how Social Security Administration plans to disarm its beneficiaries. All this is coming back out again, all the same week after Orlando. I don't even want to go talk about it. You can read these stories all yourself. You know some of these. My listeners know about it, but it's not just knowing about it and dismissing it. Self-censoring against proper action is what they want. They go after your mental capacities, and this is one of the things about that the Supreme Court put in. Well, if you have a mental incapacity, you shouldn't have the right to bear arms. I don't see that in the Second Amendment. It's meant to have every able-bodied man, woman, and maybe even child. I say child adverse, and I don't mean the wards of the state. I mean your offspring, your sons and daughters, to fight against the tyrants in government when they come after you. I see no mental incapacity as a limitation there, folks. And yet there's a whole rule set that's come out, and I hear crickets on that. Some of you should be interested. I would think some of you would be interested just to say, oh, that's pretty innocuous. I should be able to get involved. There shouldn't be too much danger in that. I can get a little bit of exercise in how to respond, even if I don't do it quite right. They just dismiss me. They make their lies. I get to respond. Well, if I have the right point, I get to go sue them. I get to go learn how to do that, too. I keep telling you, folks, you know what 10,000 people doing this would do to these people, these agents, these people in government, the court system? Especially if you kind of know what I'm talking about and you realize that the court system is the problem. Again, the trust, right? You lost it. If you can't trust government, we're going to have a problem. Came right out of the mouth of the unqualified one. And I told you the very next week, you're right, we got a problem. We got a big problem. But all y'all that are crickets are agreeing that the problem is not important enough. That the distrust is okay. And you allow the psychopath to rule you. You allow this corruption, these lies, these criminals, these liars, these cheaters, these thieves, these plunderers, however word you want to call them, they come in and they go there because you let them rise to the top in the cockistocracy you live in. It's pretty simple. And as I said that, thank you again to Solomon. Again, clarity. The long-distance communication that we have is kind of difficult at some level. But he brings up this idea that you don't want to do a lot of this for yourself. And I have to kind of agree. Until I see different, I have to agree. Not that I'm agreeing that he doesn't. I mean, that's what I see. He sees, I see. He sees it from Brazilistan. How clear is this that he sees it from across the equator, folks? Trust is all important. When you lose it, you should have been responding. Not be crickets, not displacing your thoughts into some other fairy tale land, or not saying, okay, that I just forget these people. I'm giving up and they can't bother me. No, they're going to come. They're here because they come here to bother you. There's no place you can run. I've told you about that. I ran to the forest. They went out and found me anyway. They couldn't do much when they found me, but it was the harassment all the time. Oh, you can't stay camping out in the public land. Well, I'm not camping. How's that? Oh, well, you should just claim a mining claim. I don't want to. Well, what are you doing here? Well, it's really none of your business. But if you want to know, under international law, I've created a sanctuary out here. Leave me alone. And it's a sanctuary under 5 other internationally respected immunities. How's that? Do you have a concept in your mouth, folks? I mean, it's got to be there in your mind to say this stuff, to go after these psychopaths that come after you, the implementers of the psychopathy. You have to be the so-called sovereign you expect to be if this is going to work out. And the order and liberty that's created in all of us having so-called sovereignty amongst ourselves is our respect to ourselves in a unified society. The destruction of liberty and order of which is anarchy. Simple. That's the definition. It's no question, except for in the recent few years after 9/11. Another dialectic narrative that gets you to be self-censor in a way that's ineffectual. So to get back to trust. That's our currency, actually. We can't trust each other, we got problems. It's not just the government. But Obama said it. You can't trust the government, we got a problem. We got a problem, folks. The government's here every day to tell you that. We have a problem. And that's your notice, your due process, your notice, giving you the opportunity to respond. And if you don't, they take your silence as their license. They take your engagement as that license to continue the process. One of the main things that we have trust in that we can't have, I can just see it now almost in the chat rooms, is government, and that's a problem. No, the government's just this framework from which we would, in our best day, hope to approach our best day on how we're going to keep our individual sovereignty in cohesion without the oppression and infringement. That we have to have trust. Parts of that trust is understanding that we all have our place, if I can say it that way, to do things that we want to choose to do, regardless of how we got there. We are excited at some level to be the farmer, the rancher, the miner, the timber harvester, the logger, or not. They're just good paying jobs that are created by someone who wants to just interested in making business. And then all the secondary industry that pops from that, all the service support, then all the people that come from that. There's from raw materials comes your society. You've got your service sector that comes from the ramifications of becoming a little better and more affluent. Which brings up the concept of, well, how do you keep track of the merit of the value? And that's money. And we now have specie that we understand, or we have fiat. And fiat is the stuff they print and we accept, whether bills of exchange, checks, notes, Federal Reserve notes, evidences of debt, notes. They're all the same thing. Fiat system is where you go. You put a signature card in a bank. You're subject to everything you don't even know that they put on that signature when you said that. That people are being oppressed by this private fiat system of public support, governmental support, and corporate support, and mercantile support, and admiralty support, and all this stuff. That we were told in the weight and measure was what we should have stayed in the Constitution of what this government would, to the local rule, acknowledge to the states, which was coin. Weight and measure of certain coin, which also hasn't been invoked. Notwithstanding the other idea that you can also just do whatever money you want, right? We got Liberty dollars, our dollars, Mountain dollar, whatever, all these things. Paper. But weight and measure is the substance of the sovereign, if you will. It's the substance of honorable people. It's something tangible. That I've been really leery about these cryptocurrencies, notwithstanding their technological advancement, because of the oppression that we are feeling. We're looking for an out. But the oppression is causing us a self-censorship to agree to these beyond fictional virtuals that I pointed out just last week. I told you this broadcast, when I look for stuff, is just on the edge. I'm right on the cut. If I don't say it that week, like I don't get to lots of stuff, it's old news. Because the next week I say something, something happens around this. Not everything, but a lot of things. I talked about Ethereum last week and cryptocurrencies. Well, this week there's a story comes right out. The DAO attacker says 3 million Ether loss is legal, where Ethereum community and the DAO hub of investors was taken for their money. This guy says it was within the private contract under which the community operates. The people that had the money taken said, we don't think so. That if you think that this digital world is something to reside in, I'm trying to remind you that our physical, tangible reality is things physical and tangible. That if you don't keep there right now, at least till we figure out our human nature, the animal nature that we have against each other, you should refine your review of what you need to do and go back to tangibility. That this Ethereum, as I told you last week, is a real problem. This isn't even to do with big data or beyond big data. This has to do with the people involved. Every monkey trying to do what they can do to take advantage and then claim it wasn't and this and that, and no one has a defense against it. Last week, if you went to the blogcaster, you read that these contracts that they write are so error-filled, it's beyond. I mean, they're astonishingly error-filled as a code, from a coding standpoint. That I told you, when you get into this digital arena, you're going to have to know about those. You're going to have to be a programmer, essentially. And you're going to have to know the nuances of this. And how do you know the unknown when you got someone that's kind of looking for exploitive power? Now, this letter might actually be that was printed out by this so-called attacker, which, if this is correct, if it's not a hoax, if this is not a cover for what happened to the Ethereum community and $50 million being stolen from 3.6 million Ethers, which that's their monetary, their unit as an Ether. If we're not talking Ether, folks, it doesn't exist. If you're not getting a clue here, I don't know what to say. But even if that letter is a hoax, they still lost apparently $50 million. But at the end of the letter, the guy calls himself the attacker. And my view was right there, even if we had an ability to go after him, and he is of existence, he did go to a lawyer and he says it's legal. By his own designation, if this is true, he didn't call himself someone who was actually conforming with the contract. He was admitting he was the attacker to it. The point for me is that $50 million is lost, and nobody but one, an exploiter, jumped in and grabbed it. That the virtual currency evaporated in a couple mouse clicks each time he went in and took his little bit of parasite food. He was able to, in his little mind, justify the removal of $50 million. Simple contracts are better contracts. What we can do from the meltdown of the DAO. And this is these blog links will tell you a little bit about what these designators are, and I don't remember now. I don't have the time to get too personal. When I start seeing they have this kind of problem early on, this kind of money shifting hands into people's without any cause, these are not ready for us, really, and I don't know if they'll ever be ready. Maybe the next generations that are brought up being coders, maybe they'll have a little better handle, but they won't understand there's a whole other legal world around this that you better also be savvy to as well. That we don't have any of these problems when we go to Weight and Measure, have a coin in our pocket. That I can show you that at least gold is property, and that has a whole other standard of protection around it than your cell phone with your wallet, that now the cops can come in and steal from you. That they're talking about simple contracts or better contracts. We've got to simplify to try and answer this admitted meltdown. There's nothing melted down like gold into coin. No, this virtual community all believing and trusting that globally they can use this digital world in cryptocurrency that melted down over last week, gone, evaporated into someone else's wallet. You know what's in your wallet, folks? Listen how they prepared us for that one. The discussion around this Ethereum is how you can't possibly know all the vulnerabilities to it. That I'm asking you to, yes, I think it's fascinating stuff, and at some level these digital currencies would allow me to ask for certain donations I don't ask for. The so-called monetary type would certainly help what I do on that side. No, instead I've asked for donations and contributions of information and questions and what do you need. That's what I have available. I could certainly use that technology, but it's just a sieve of problems. That they're willing to lose 50 million and take it on the chin and then, we'll learn by making things simpler. The underlying premise of which is sitting on a fault, a major fault, a couple of them. And that's your digital hardware, your digital world, run by software. Run by people, even with their best intent, who doesn't know the outside there's an anarchist waiting to come in and take your stuff. Like every other guy or woman on a horse that had a bow and an army that they loved them to come and take your town out. This is our problem. It's why we came to the United States, and we had certain things that we were supposed to do different and did do different for a long time, and we still do for those of us that know how to start imposing it. Though it's not readily recognizable by many, that there was a system of laws based on evidence and due process, not the stuff they're giving us, based in, again, evidence that we could use to keep peace and order. And part of that contract was that we would allow to ourselves and our states, more local than federal, the ability to keep specie or tangible gold, property, available to ourselves. One more protection against the tyranny that we've abandoned in favor of these digital sovereignties, these digital territories that you have absolutely zero control over, that people are getting so involved in them without noticing this little problem that has already raised its ugly head. Is a phenomenon to me to watch. So this is what people trying to do, intending good things. Then we get over to Microsoft. What does Microsoft does not want you to know about Windows 10? I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm on record that that is going down the wrong path. Windows 10. What I got out of this report, as I'm reading kind of quickly through, I'm just looking to see, okay, what is this guy saying? He's going through all these settings, all these things. You don't want to use this. You got to go check that. You got to go this here, and you got to go over here and mark this, and don't go over here and do this, and then watch this that you do. And here's some other problems with Windows 10. And how about uninstalling Windows 10? That's a good one. But all this time to write up how you go around trying to outdo what Microsoft is doing. When you look at this whole thing, I'm asking myself, why do you even use a product, the company of which threatens your privacy as much as this, and you continue to use it? Is our problem in the world. Why would you even think to start going through all that? That's the software on top of the hardware. And this is a company that's going for profit. We're now way out of Ethereum, although Microsoft is tied into that, you see. How that behooves Microsoft and watching out that someone can take all that based on some legal theory is beyond me to conceptualize. I'm just not wired that way to figure out how you, well, I guess if you're not worried about integrity, you don't care, do you? No, their product is full of these holes. And we have to make the hard choice, and at some point it's going to come. I mean, the broadcast may degrade if it's ever gone to the point long enough that I cannot use some of the programs I use that require the Windows. And hopefully, I'm hoping that those that are independent and use hopefully AMD is still clean enough, AMD processors and maybe a Linux distribution, maybe they'll come up with the answers by the time I get there. I'm hoping so, because I can't do it myself. Windows is tying into Ethereum that's got just a sieve of problems, insecurities. Windows 10 is malware. We have people trying to explain how to make it less like malware. Is our problem. So when you got operating systems and things that are that way, and then you find out here, and I think last night I picked this up, new Intel CPUs have NSA exploitable secret hidden backdoor. That this is not actually new news. I think I've reported on this quite a few years ago. But they were putting stuff on your system that you can't undo. I mean, they were putting keyloggers and everything right in the systems. It was how they were getting at your microphones and turn them on, and they were actually working when you didn't want them on, and all this other stuff. Now they have a new chip. It works completely independent of your hardware, your computer. It connects up to the power. You turn your system off. It's still hooked up to the power. It's connected up to the internet. It's a mini computer that communicates wherever it's told to go communicate. It's called a management engine or a manageability engine. Now, this is Intel chips, and I'm hoping that AMD kind of holds out and they don't put this other chip in the computer system. My mind went to, well, maybe I can hacksaw some traces. Maybe that'll do. I'll do some jumper. That's when my mind starts. I'll rewire it, folks. But why would I have to? Why am I going to get into a world that is doing this exploitation in a place where you find out just in a couple mouse clicks, and it was over some time though, I think, $50 million gets evaporated from account. What about all of your savings? What about your debt, folks? What if all of a sudden you have a bunch of debt on you? All because of the exploits that are created by the people that are running big data, the governmental system that promotes itself through these corporations. Is a real problem. You will have to decide how you're going to live through it. You're going to have to make that conscious, talk about slave mentality. You're going to have to make that conscious decision that you will bring yourself susceptible to whatever someone else has planned for you. However they want to exploit your life. It's just a new digital slavery to me. This story came up. You look at it. We got software that's malware. You got people with good intentions that have problems. You have software that's malware. Now you have hardware that's made to phone home, but without any ability for you to do anything. And we talked a little bit about this when the phones came out. They had a separate battery. You couldn't turn them off. They went to burst technology. They were turning on your microphones. They were turning on your camera. All that was already there. This is not even new news. What I'm saying is that here is the notice that they intend to use it. Absolutely. Intel is in it, with it. I haven't heard about AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. I happen to run an AMD on my broadcast system. It's not the fastest thing, but it seems to chug right along. So I'm happy. It's good enough. One day these things may not be available, and I've already made the decision on Skype. You see me cut right off of that, folks. I kind of went for 3 or 4 months, let everybody kind of get the idea that maybe I'm moving over. Maybe they should too. We'd set up another program that we all could get together and talk, and 4 people went with me, and then we never even talked. So constrained to habit and our victimization are we, I believe. That McAfee comes out. Now listen, we have people who intend to do good that has one bad apple. We have Microsoft and other companies that are malware now. They're their products. And then we have now the hardware that's completely malware itself. That McAfee comes in and says a new cybersecurity firm, John McAfee Global Technology, seeks to secure cryptocurrency products. My first thought on this, and he apparently didn't get voted into his party that he was running for president. If this guy wanted to be the American president, I have no problem. I don't even know John McAfee. I just see he has some interesting statements. He's pretty assertive of what he says. I'm a pretty straightforward cut guy. But when he came in to give new cybersecurity, currencies where the hardware is circumventing every effort he can do in software. What the heck is he promoting first? Secondly, why is he doing intangible digital currency when our problem is we accepted fiat and then digital? We're going to Hades in a handbasket. We're sliding into the stinking abyss when what he should be protecting is tangible money. Specie, for those of you who haven't heard the word, and I'm not talking evolution. McAfee is going to make cryptocurrency products based upon hardware that's already compromised. It is a fascination to me. Well, maybe I'm just not the sharpest tool. Maybe these people really are brilliant. Maybe they have the answer. Our history doesn't say that, but maybe, just maybe, I'm just not seeing this quite right. I'm getting a little weak-eyed in my old age. The complete digital universe, the complete digital territory is not where you are sovereign. Let's put it that way. And we are just falling right into all of that. I told you when Microsoft bought Skype, we all had to conjecturally, but it made sense at the time. It still makes plenty of sense. That there was complaint that Microsoft paid like $8 billion for Skype. Why'd they pay so much? And I said it was to get the encryption. They needed it to be able to tap in. You saw that's exactly what they went. They went from centralized servers, and they went right after picking up everything you use on Skype, which is when I found that out, I stopped using it completely. That I told you about big data, silent weapons, quiet wars. It's on the bottom of the Blogcaster page. This is your future. This is these virtual, digital. I hate the word virtual as well. These are real enough, but they're digital. Electrons and positron holes and all this other material science stuff that gets them to do what they need to you, the future they want. That all these things are big data sponge places that they get you to plug into. On top of the things I've just talked about before, Microsoft to buy LinkedIn for $26 billion. Bravo dollars. $26.2 billion. Is stupid money, first of all, in my mind, but shows you the amount of money that's out there to be spent and to put into transfer around the world to pick up a professional sponge for your personal data. That Microsoft is all over. And I don't know how many times I get people send emails, oh, you've been asked to join LinkedIn and become, some kind of a connection. I said, no, I'm not going to do any of that. These are big information sponges to do what they want and to create realities that they need. All based on hardware that's now full of holes, software that's malware. Even when you're well-intentioned, there's going to be the bad apple. It claims to be not the bad apple. Oh, I polished my skin up really nice. I look good, don't I? The war against you is being waged every day. Silent against you, the silent weapons against you are your future prison. They are controlling you. They are controlling you now. They'll be controlling you at every turn. I'm sitting here pausing. What do I say? If that doesn't start to make a thought in your mind that you really have something truly to do, and something that has to change, I don't know. The writing's more than on the wall. They've got the structure that we're watching. It's just more than paint, folks. This is actually how this thing has been set up for us. That there's a more tangible world, a more tangible reality that we can get back into that offers some measure of, a large measure actually, when we properly apply it amongst ourselves and to those that would trespass it, a larger measure, law of the land, is much more powerful than these intangible virtual electrons or fiat currencies. if we all knew that. And I mean without doubt. There's a lot of that. You get knowledge, but you still have doubt. I keep telling you, that's why you got to research this stuff. See it for you. See the black and white for yourself. The war against you is here. The battlefield America is no joke. The Orlando case comes up, and they immediately go after one more agenda, as well as quite a few that I haven't even talked about. All on what appears to be a military mission executed with patsies involved. However the show on the stage gets done, to create, again, this dialectic narrative to trigger self-censorship, which I extend to inaction or improper action, based on false fronts, not false flags. You can call them that if you want. Now, it comes out all in the same week again, back to the Second Amendment. We're supposed to protect ourselves in a substantive way, not going into virtual, fabricated, fictional jurisdictions like fiat currency or digital territory. Oh, it's a great tool. Don't get me wrong. I'm a technology guy. But there's a limit where it starts to be the beyond threat. It is the weapon against us. That the true weapon that the government fears, well, they have us all thinking that we have a thou shalt not infringe is supposed to be absolute, and then you look around and then they infringe at every turn, and then everybody's crickets. Another thing that slipped out this week was Jay Johnson says that gun control is now a matter of Homeland Security. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson on Tuesday said that the gun control is now a critical element of protecting the U.S. homeland and keeping Americans safe. Folks, I've just said some stuff about the Second Amendment. What was your immediate response when I read that Jay Johnson says that gun control is Homeland Security? Folks, isn't the Second Amendment, isn't that the Homeland Security? Isn't the Second Amendment not subject to Department of Homeland Security? Isn't it the statement of the fulfillment of the fundamental right, beyond any infringement, that we have, the government can expect we shall move against a lawless government? That this guy saying that the department, this is the executive branch saying that that gun control is a matter of Homeland Security, is not the height of the message to you that these people are warring against you? Isn't the Second Amendment the actual measure for Homeland Security? That this guy, the war, or the weapon, the government against you, that just put billions into their weapons and put gun control legislation on you to stop your ability to stop their transgressions, says that gun control is actually Homeland Security. I submit the Second Amendment is actual Homeland Security, and guess what? Crickets don't have guns. Crickets don't have arms. And that's why this guy can say what he just said. And it goes a week and no one says anything against it. And what little bit does get said is stated by associations of representation, not by those having the fundamental right to exert that protection for the so-called homeland. Gun control is not the people's security. It certainly is the aggressor occupier's need. Again, Libre Code says the occupying force will do everything it can and has to in order to secure itself. Wouldn't the infringement upon the Second Amendment right to stop them be one of their targets? Is what this story is trying to get you to believe. The dialectic narrative that will trigger self-censorship and non-action. I hear crickets. I declare it to be a success. Dialectic narratives. what you don't understand about what you need, your fundamental needs, being all controlled as they are still having to be supplied by you, and that's one of the first things they take out. The messages are out there. The notice to us that there's something on the winds, whether or not how much you want to get buying into it and the immediacy of it, well, that's up to each one of us to decide. But one of the other weapons against us is certainly, we've been talking about fiat currencies. Now, digital currencies is a monetary system, a money system that right now is completely controlled, and I've been saying you better move on over to something of substance to protect yourself. Admittedly, I'm not the expert. There's just some sense that has to be made of this, and you have to respond to that sense, the good sense that's being made. That a Deutsche Bank's shocking ECB rant warns of social unrest and another Great Depression was a story that came out. That I'm just going to have this as reference, but I want to point out something here, folks. If you haven't looked around, we're in a depression. They might be doing much better in Germany, but in America, we're in a depression. And I don't want to get into the semantics in my mind of the more proper economic technical term. We are in a state of destruction. Let's put it that way. Monetary and fiscally. That this report isn't a rant enough to identify the actual reality that we're sitting in that allows us to, again, to buy into the dialectic narrative that triggers our self-censorship and inaction. Banks are secretly red flagging our everyday transactions for DHS. It's a monetary commerce war against you. I don't make this stuff up, folks. I just read it and I remembered it. 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act is one of the main sources for this. And then it got evolved into what we now know as the Patriot Act, and there's sections and all this nonsense that the occupying force in the world is as Putin just said, the only major war power, the major supreme power in the world, which I think is tongue-in-cheek. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That the banks are red flagging everyday transactions for the DHS is the same statement that says in the dialectic narrative that says that, well, gun control is Homeland Security. That your digital world, your digital life is, the banks are just informers. Your bank transactions are being reported to the DHS as a document that has been exposed, revealing the fact. Again, for those of you just can't believe the reality of the reality. Yeah, it's big deal to deal with all this stuff. As long as we stay tied in, we have some measure of having that ring in the nose becoming the accessory to the crime against us. The removal of the ring allows you some measure of freedom. It puts you under different servitudes. When you step out of that thing, you got a different style of oppression that comes up, but that's the honest one. That's the one where you actually know they are the oppressor, occupier, and they have no law. Now, for some reason, that's a whole lot more secure to me to know that than the one where I was under the illusion that wasn't the case. If I hadn't have been in that more clear mind of that was the reality, I couldn't come up with what I do today. Or the ability to take something I don't know that anybody else in the world even looked at. That was spoken to before, but kind of absorbed in this narrative that goes on to quell our independent, our non-dependent considerations, was this chasm between commerce and land soil disposal, productive life versus commerce life. The actual nature of us versus the fictional. Finding that has had to come. It could not have come without me being able to throw the truth in my face that we are living in an occupying sense. An oppressor is amongst us under the color of benefice. That every tool it creates, this critter creates, is to your demise a control, subjection, construction, fiction, and essentially ineffectuality in your life. You become the host to the parasite. That I'm asking here behind the woodshed to start responding to it. Don't just acknowledge, oh, it's messed up, and then shut down. Acknowledge that it's messed up. Find something within the mess and clean that part of the room up. Just clean that part up. Get experience to do so. It really is empowering. I've been trying behind the woodshed, evolutionary engagement to empower you. It's empowering to look at this. It hasn't fixed everything immediately, but that's a different dynamic. If each one of us found the dirty room in our existence and our perception that really just bothered us, and we took responsibility to clean that little bit of the room, that'd be the one more spot in the world that was clean. And I don't mean based on your subjective determination. There's enough out there that's already before us that we can rely on the black and white that tells us how to go about doing this in a respectful manner that isn't beyond the agreement, that the so-called social contract of keeping liberty and order in place and keeping at bay that anarchy that these people are bringing on us. This occupation. By whatever name you can do it. There's many, many of them, as I have told you. But let me give you maybe not so much a cricket here. Let me remove the crickets for a moment and say there's someone who decided to step up. I don't know who these people are, but very interesting little dynamic that you can start learning to do this very thing I'm telling you. This is someone coming, some agency of a government coming to a property owner wanting to install this consensus amenities-based imposition on their land as a study. And won't you want to help us? And this one, these two, husband and wife, were aware enough to know that as a private property owner, this was like Dracula, coming to the door and, can I come in? The setup here, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife wanted to study frogs on the property belonging to private homeowner. The homeowner was willing to oblige, but first the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife would have to get a taste of their own bureaucratic penalties that they place on the public. So this is taking a problem, thinking about it, and reapplying this back without risk to you, and by exercising that sovereignty that sits in the land, in the soil, that underpins this country, that you can put back on them. I thought this was more of an example of what could be done by someone and has the property owner who can know where his land title is, ultimate title is, can do. It was beyond this, and I don't know that I do a couple of these things, but that's irrelevant. This gentleman stepped up and I think at least properly addressed what normally has caused Supreme Court cases because the people didn't respond correctly. This is a letter written to Anderson, Larry, Larry and Amanda Anderson, from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Dear landowner, ODFW staff will be conducting surveys for foothill yellow-legged frogs and other amphibians over the next few months. As part of this research, we would like to survey the creek on your property. I am writing this letter to request your permission to access your property. Recent research indicates the foothill yellow-legged frogs have declined significantly in recent years and are no longer found at half of their historic sites. Your cooperation will be greatly appreciated, and it will help to contribute to conservation of this important species. Please fill out the attached postpaid postcard and let us know if you are willing to let us cross your property or not. If you have any questions or concerns about this project, please give us a call. We would love to talk to you about our research. Sincerely, Stephen Niamela, Conservation Strategy Implementation Biologist. So most people would either ignore this or not, and these government agencies would come out, and then they'll come up with the Fish and Wildlife, and they come when they say they have all these law. They send their letters. That's a notice and opportunity, time and place to respond. These people did. To the request, to the survey, which shows you this is not carte blanche, the state has power to invade. This is the first evidence you should pick up. But that was the letter from the government. This was the response to Stephen Niemela, the conservation strategy implementation biologist of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Dear Mr. Niemela, thank you for your inquiry regarding accessing our property to survey for the yellow-legged frog. We may be able to help you out in this matter. We have divided our 2.26 acres into 75 equal survey units with a draw tag for each unit. Application fees are $8 per unit after you purchase the frog survey license. That's $120 for residents and $180 for non-residents. You will also need to obtain a frog habitat parking permit, $10 per vehicle. You will also need an invasive species stamp for the vehicle. It's $15 for the first vehicle and $5 each additional vehicle. You will want to also register at the check station to have your vehicle inspected for non-native plant life prior to entering our property. There is also a day use fee of $5 per vehicle. If you are successful in the draw, you will be notified 2 weeks in advance so you can make necessary plans to purchase your creek habitat stamp. That's $18 residents and $140 for non-residents. Survey units open between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., but you cannot commence survey until 9 a.m. and must cease all survey activity after 1 p.m. Survey gear can only include a net with a 2-inch diameter made of 100% organic cotton netting with no longer than an 18-inch handle, non-weighted, and no deeper than 6 feet from the net frame to the bottom of the net. Handles can only be made of BPA-free plastics or wooden handles. After 1 p.m., you can use the net with a 3-inch diameter if you purchase the frog net endorsement, which is $75 for residents and $250 for non-residents. Any frogs captured that are released will need to be released with the approved release device back into the environment unharmed. As of June 1st, we are also offering draw tags for our premier survey units, an application to, again, only $8 per application. However, all fees can be waived if you can verify native Indian tribal rights and status. You will also need to provide evidence of successful completion of the frog surveys and comprehensive course on frog identification, safe handling practices, self-defense strategies for frog attacks. This course is offered online through an accredited program for a nominal fee of $750. Please let us know if we can be of assistance to you. Otherwise, we decline access to our property, but appreciate your inquiry. Sincerely, Larry and Amanda Anderson. Would that be enough said, folks? Somebody who understands his property rights, as evidenced by the nonsense that a bureaucracy will put, took his power within the property to assert the very same thing. I was cautious about even allowing myself, I would be cautious, but about allowing even the idea that they could even fulfill all of that. That's how treacherous these people are. But you notice he did a very brilliant point. He made this pursuant to a draw, which can be denied, right? So there was his little, to my mind, his little out. To do exactly what bureaucracy does to you, where they have no right, this property owner had the power to do against the agency. I suspect we're not going to hear this property in the Supreme Court at any time. This is the evidence of what I tell you, properly responding. When a government letter comes to you, this happens to be on this eco-terrorist conservation felony against people that I speak about all the time. That's why I probably am reading it, because it's the kind of things that we do. This is not the original letter I've seen that has done this. I'm just telling you, this is the latest one that I've seen come out. And they had quite a bit in it. I thought the draw was particularly attuned. We've done it ourselves in our own claims, where we've actually told the Forest Service, If you want to administer the law, you have to come to us for permits, and we're going to ask you for the bond, the permit, the applications, the fees, and all that. We've said it ourselves. But this says that you, as a property owner, the law of the land has power against the state. It's not omnipotent, omnipresent. If I can refer to what Ron was talking about, you're not the slave here. And I want to make that distinction. You're not the slave in this capacity, in this status. You might be in about every other place, but not here. And this is even above if these people even know about whether or not they claimed a deed. You understand, notwithstanding whatever the property was listed as in the record, if these conservationist biologists went and looked, it still required the request, didn't it? A small glimpse of our ability to properly respond. I thought this was brilliant. It happened to come at the right time when you kind of need some of this stuff to see that we're just not, we're only helpless because we're the victim we've wanted to be. Not only is this the proper response, it was creatively done, correct? I have a smile on my face if the guy who wrote that didn't, for himself and herself, the wife. So despite all I've said up until we see all the tools they hand us to place ourselves into the reality they want us, there is another reality sitting in stark contrast. And when you see this, you have to think back, like all the people I've told you about in the news and all that, all the Supreme Court cases, all the people getting beat down. When I talked about the Sugar Pine Mine and they got their notice from the BLM, it's all answered just like this. This happens to be super creative, but I mean, it's all answered with your authority to do so. That all these people that didn't are the ones that make the news is another style of dialectic narrative to trigger your self-censorship. Because what I've told you is these, not this letter, but when you get these court cases coming down from the Supreme Court and the property owner wins, I tell you, no, he didn't, because he's now still subject to the administration of the regulation. How do we know that? In the one with the rancher in the pond, he agreed to put willows, which suck the water up no less, and intrude into the ground to make passages for water to come out, which is probably partly why they did that. He agreed to to an imposition by the agency that had no authority at all. That's not a win. Is this guy here going to have to put a willows in his property, folks? Highly unlikely. Is he going to have to open a conservation easement to this yellow-legged frog? Highly unlikely. They'll do it a different way. The point is that here's the example of how you respond. That you respond. You don't take their words on face value, however nice, however authoritative it sounds, however they ply your wanting, your charitable nature. It's no different than Dracula standing on your door asking to come in the door. Never let Dracula in your door. No matter how polished his white makeup looks, how nice his lipstick is, how straight his hair is, and how pressed his cape is, don't let Dracula in the door. Better, you become creative and really lay the lashings on him. So I got a kick out of this. This went around the people that I have emails that went around. Lots of people are telling me, did you read it? Yes, I did. Here it is. I wanted to let you know. This is the chasm between the government oppressor and you, if you know to place yourself on the law side. Who'd have thunk it, folks? Been involved all this time. I didn't realize there was a Frog Survey NU comprehensive course. I couldn't afford to pay it. I couldn't even be this conservation biologist. But, you know, the taxpayers got all the money in the world. They could actually pay for this accredited program. Because you always want to be knowing of your self-defense strategies for frog attack. Remember that. Don't ever walk out in the forest. There's the other thing. Don't walk in the forest. Though these frogs are cagey. You'd probably be money well spent to contact this guy and pay the money. I suspect these people aren't going to do anything. They'll move on to the next property owner who doesn't know. This is exactly how it happens in mining. They'll, like I told you last week, I got miners that I'm helping that help themselves, really. I just kind of guide their study and their how they think about how they're going to approach the problem, anticipate what's going to happen in the future. All the guys that I'm helping are all working. In fact, I just saw 2 trucks go out yesterday, and they got a piece of machinery on there that's going to be in the river that if a eco-terrorist saw it, they'd die. How big this tube is going out there to suck the gravel off the ground. The guys I know work. The guys I know how to respond. The guys that fight me, or the ones that don't want to believe what I'm saying or wanted to have someone else do it, they're all mad at the guys that I know that are working, blaming them, like Cain, for their travail. That's our problem. The microcosm of the miner is the macrocosm I see as America. All this is not that hard. A lot of it is right here in this example of the letter request and in this case, the creative letter response. No, thank you. And this is an interesting way. You offer a way they could, even though it's as fantastical as it is, you can offer a way, but it's under what? Your determination. So you're seeing when they make a regulation, they're taking claim of the possession to be able to impose all this. And our research says that the government has no claim over not anything that wasn't granted to them in the Admissions Act, or where they can show that they paid money, acquired it by some payment, even as fiat as it was, to acquire the rights to the soil. The states can't claim the water. That was given to you for appropriations. Under what law? The Act of 1866, the Lode Law. That use of the water there is a necessity. It's a public benefit of public use. I want to ask you folks, is a public necessity a pretty high defense of the use of property against a state capricious, amenity-driven imposition? Do you think public necessity use of the water is a pretty high use that you should have known to assert if that ever came to you? Mining has that level. Why are the miners not working? When mining has that use of water, has that level, is the ignorance of our own people, of our own laws, and the corruption that sits between us and our resource, our production. Our wealth, folks, is our problem in this country. I come every week to try to expose this stuff to you. Different methods. Here's one. This property owner knew something, folks. You need to as well. And it takes the action. You can't just not listen to that letter and let it go away. You can't listen to someone make it's like this guy Trump saying, oh, just the people on the hit list, they should not have their right. Folks, I've got evidence of a guy who shouldn't be on that list. It's a felony against him, and he's on it, that Trump would take that gun against him. And this guy is a veteran who did fight, who did all kinds of, I mean, I can't imagine, I don't know what y'all, when you went to battle, what you all saw that just is disgusting, is in his memory, and he's being treated because of an FBI felon and a DOJ felon, that he is now being subject to what Trump believes is something he can take away a gun where it says thou shalt not infringe, because that gun is to be used for the very reason for this tyranny that's against us. And I hear crickets instead of setting up to either use it or making the notices that they are about to be used, which would be the better way, I think. Well, I don't believe in that that is a final solution. I've told you that. But it's there for us, and it shall not be infringed. Why do I hear crickets on its infringement is an amazing thing. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope something I said will spark some enthusiasm to go after clean the room that you can find that bothers you, that's dirty. Thank you to Grimner on reallibertymedia.com and the Blogcaster, and Bo Diddy and Grimner at freedomsnetwork.com, and Jules at ucy.tv. And all you terrestrial broadcasters that may be out there, folks, pass the podcast around. I know my time is 2 hours without breaks, but that's the way it works. We don't get a lot of airtime because there's a lot of other things going on in other networks that don't go on here. It's 100% information to you. Thank you again. Take care. Tech diffs and nature willing. I'll be back next week.